Halo, perhaps the most important first-person shooter in console history. With sprawling alien worlds, perfectly refined gameplay mechanics, and addictive multiplayer, Bungie's unique vision of first-person warfare took the world by storm almost 15 years ago. Having left the Halo franchise behind 5 years ago, the responsibility now lies in the hands of the talented team at 343 Industries, a group formed for the sole purpose of guiding the Halo franchise into the future. Now, after weathering a great many challenges over the past few years, we stand on the cusp of the next installment in this hallowed franchise, Halo 5 Guardians. This is John from Digital Foundry, and I'm here to guide you through an initial look at the final version of Halo 5 on Xbox One. We've kept an eye on the game over the past year, and we're excited to finally have this game in hand. Today, we're going to reflect on the changes, improvements, and issues we encountered during the first few missions of the campaign. Let's get started. When looking back over the previous installments in the franchise, there is a certain cohesiveness to each game that really elevates the series to another level. The end-to-end experience you get in a Bungie Halo game remains something few other titles can match, and it's one we feel 343 Industries itself hasn't quite delivered on just yet. Jumping into Halo 5, we were eager to discover if 343 has finally managed to capture that elusive spark. Upon starting any classic Halo title, players are greeted with a beautiful menu system full of expertly designed background elements, smart typeface choices, and smooth navigation. It's something that has continued throughout the series, and with Halo 5, 343 Industries has managed to deliver something that feels suitably Halo. While a number of options remain locked until the multiplayer comes online, the overarching design is well executed, as you can see here. Compared to the somewhat unpolished presentation in the Master Chief Collection, where odd performance issues and awkward design decisions detracted a bit from the menu experience, this feels like a small victory. Loading screens are another area where Bungie's games have excelled in the past. Rather than simply presenting a static image loaded with tips or a simple loading bar, classic Halo games make use of complex patterns and design elements that keep the player engaged in the experience while waiting. Animations are mixed with haunting music in just the right way. They're just loading screens, of course, but it all feels rather special. Halo 5 is rather interesting in this regard. The aforementioned animations are nowhere in sight, replaced instead with a standard loading bar indicating progress. Yet there's good news here. Loading times are fast. We're talking just a few seconds here to load most missions. It may lack the visual panache we've come to appreciate in Bungie's games, but at least Halo 5 doesn't require much waiting. Once loaded, things begin with a lovely pre-rendered cinematic sequence showcasing a team of Spartans performing impossible actions as they rush down the side of a mountain. It's a nice way to kick off the game, and the video compression is good enough to avoid macro blocking. The synchronization between the soundtrack and visuals is also quite remarkable here. While this intro sequence is pre-rendered, the rest of the game's cutscenes are fully real-time and showcase some remarkably impressive visuals. Cutscenes operate at 30 frames per second with a higher resolution than we see during gameplay, though aliasing is still rather plentiful. What steals the show here, however, is the lighting, animation, and model quality. It's a huge step forward for the franchise and showcases some of the finest real-time cutscenes we've seen to date. We've come a long way from last generation Nathan Fillion here, all the way to this sequence in Halo 5. Quite a difference indeed. Once the game proper begins, we're treated to a short scripted animation before finally being handed control. Looking around, the opening area makes a pretty good first impression. As we push past the fallen enemies here, players will come upon a rather dramatic view of the war waging around them. Looking out across the canyon, we see lots of activity that makes the battlefield feel as if the battle is raging around the player, even if it's just background detail. We see plenty of ships buzzing around, complemented by laser blasts and explosions. Color theory is in full effect here as well, with orange and teal dominating the general color palette of the scene. One nitpick we just have to air is the HUD design. While it's visually pleasing, the helmet overlay simply takes up too much screen real estate for our tastes. When coupled with the traditionally narrow FOV the series is known for, we would have loved to have seen an option to disable the helmet overlay completely. The dynamic resolution feature we've discussed in earlier coverage of the game is present here as well, and it appears to deliver results roughly on par with the incomplete build we played a month ago. This means that the resolution of the final game is constantly being adjusted on the fly according to pixel load as a means to sustain its target frame rate. Full 1080p remains a bit of a rarity here, but image quality is a fair trade-off to make in order to hit the target frame rate of 60 frames per second. Let's go ahead and enable the frame rate analysis tool before continuing. You'll note that right out of the gate, we're seeing a completely horizontal line here. Halo 5 maintains its 60 frames per second objective without breaking a sweat. In fact, duplicate frames are almost exclusively reserved for short moments between arenas as the game loads in new assets, something that has always been present in the Halo series. The first 3 missions of the game at least managed to hold a near perfect 60 frames per second across the board. We've examined more than 30 minutes of footage using our frame rate analysis software and came back with less than 30 duplicate frames. What's impressive about the fluidity of the experience is the sheer amount of action happening around the player. There are more enemies and friendly units on screen here than in any previous Halo game, yet the frame rate never buckles. Performance really is key to Halo 5, as it enables faster gameplay than ever before. We were skeptical of the changes being made to the formula, but it actually works very well here. A rather addictive learning curve pushed us to master the controls, which in turn enables some pretty outstanding firefights. Mid-air dashes give way to hover jets, which suspend the player in air while aiming, which then gives way to a full-on ground pound. This increased moveset adds a new layer of complexity to the experience that is already pretty rewarding to learn. The feeling of engagement is further enhanced by the excellent audio mix. The 7.1 mix on offer in Halo 5 left us duly impressed. The sound of bullets and debris kicking up around the player is convincing enough that we were fooled into thinking someone was knocking on our window twice.
Meridian Station. I let you through, those monsters will follow. No way. If you want to help, then secure that bridge.
Another detail we noticed is the water. Halo 3 was well known for its interactive water mesh, which could present realistic wave patterns while reacting to the player and enemy movements. This was scaled back in Halo 4, but we at least see some improvements in Halo 5. Bodies of water in Halo 5 appear flat with a mix of cube map and screen space reflections, but as players move through the water, we actually see 3-dimensional ripples in their wake, as you can see here. The effect really only draws these ripples in a set pattern, but it's still an improvement over Halo 4, and it looks pretty good. One issue that really stands out, however, is the loss of animation frames at a distance. Essentially, characters rendered out at a certain distance from the player lose half their frames of animation. So while their position is still updated every frame, their animation only changes every 2 frames. That means during normal gameplay, large numbers of foes can be seen animating at 30 frames per second rather than 60. This mismatch creates some rather awkward looking moments reminiscent of Halo Combat Evolved on the PC. There are actually plenty of issues with level of detail pop-in, variable shadow quality, and texture resolution throughout. But really, this only scratches the surface of Halo 5, and that's gonna have to wrap it up for now. Next time though, we'll take a closer look at the game and discover just what it takes to reach a completely stable 60 frames per second in a modern shooter. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more on Halo 5 in the future, be sure to hit subscribe below. But until next time, this is John signing off.